Can I help it if I fall in love with you? Can I help it if
Tally ho! Joolz Guides here, in which I wander around London and tell you fascinating facts. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you like these videos. And today we're back in Covent Garden again because I've been invited this time by the Covent Garden Trust to make a video all about how they protect the historical aspects of the buildings from private enterprise. So we're going to start here and we're going to wander all the way around the area, down the road, back into here, and anyway, you'll see. Let's go.
do you want me to turn away? Come back again someday. If you don't mind, I think I'd rather stay around.
Now, Covent Garden comes from Convent Garden because this is basically back in the 15th century. This is where like, the monks of Westminster Abbey used to grow their vegetables around here. But then, of course, King Henry VIII came along and he knocked down all the monasteries and everything. And this whole area fell into the hands of the Earl of Bedford. That's why you'll probably see a lot of road names like Bedford Street and Russell Street because the Earls of Bedford were from the Russell family. Anyway, in 1631, the Earl of Bedford commissioned Inigo Jones, who's like this famous architect, to build a square here for wealthy aristocrats and stuff to live here. In fact, it was the first commercial living development outside of the City of London. And of course, Inigo Jones had just been to Italy, so he loved all these Italian styles. And it was, in fact, the first piazza of its type in England. And look, this is the oldest house in Covent Garden. This is a Russell House, built in 1716. This is where in the 60s the Middle Earth Club was. You know, so that footage of David Bowie as a Pierrot. He was in something called Pierrot in Turquoise. Before he was famous, it was all that weird mime he was doing. Lindsay Kemp, they say that in exchange for sexual favours, he gave him a part in his Pierrot in Turquoise show. And that's where it took place. Pink Floyd, The Who, T-Rex played there. And it was actually in here that Tony Visconti first saw Mark Bolan from T-Rex. So he made him into a star, and then it was through that he then got introduced to David Bowie. So we got this place to thank for the Heroes album, I suppose. It's also where Select Modelling Agency used to be. When I was working at Hamleys over there, I used to squirt all the models with my water pistol. It actually got me the sack from the shop in the end. But you know, how else? My job was toy demonstrator. How are you supposed to demonstrate a water pistol if you don't squirt it at people? Anyway, hello Matthew Faganini, if you're watching.
I'm Peter Scott, the chair of the Covent Garden Area Trust. It was set up really to provide a sort of safeguard against the risk that the market building might be demolished, which originally had been the plan.
So this main bit of the market was built in 1830. Before there, it was just a big open square. Gradually, the whole area became a fruit and veg market, immortalised in George Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion. That's My Fair Lady to you and me. And in 1974, it all became a bit too congested around here, so they moved down to 9 Elms. They wanted to build a massive dual carriage motorway from Trafalgar Square all the way through here, knock all this stuff down, and it was going to go all the way through to Holborn or something. But thankfully, there was a big outcry by local people, and I think that's how the trust eventually came about.
The idea was to create a helicopter port, hotel and entertainment complex, conference centres and so on. At that time, it was largely thanks to a local campaign run by local people, residents, who persuaded the government to save the buildings, list them, and stop the plans for redevelopment. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the special place we see today.
There was a time when I would cry at night for you. But now I lie awake until the morning.
From about 1920 to 1980, this used to be the Great Britain Communist Party headquarters. There was one occasion when they did a raid there early on. Was it the 50s? The police occupied a house next door and they went down, they dug through, and then they came up underneath the stage. And then the communists, they sensed that the police were underneath there. So they called the police. And so the other police came along and they ended up arresting the plainclothes police who were underneath the floor. This fella called Peter Wright, who was from the MI5, he devised a bugging device, a fake door for the coal chute, which is there. And it would be too obvious if they installed it in broad daylight, so they all had to dress up as drunken hooligans. They all went along with their wives, all like walking down the road going, and then they all sort of, one of their wives sort of fell over there whilst they all started laughing and getting drunk. In the kerfuffle and the melee, he whipped out his fake door, which had a bug in it, and he put it there, and that's how they bugged the Communist Party.
There we go. Catalogues as well. Anyway, I've got a parade to catch.
You can see from here, the Garrett Club over there, that's the one that's in the news lately because Sherry Blair is going to court on behalf of women because they won't allow women in there. It's an actors club. It started up in the old days when actors weren't allowed into all the other posh gentlemen's clubs. But you know who was a member there was A.A. Milne, you know who wrote Winnie the Pooh? And when he died, he left a lot of his estate to the Garrett Club. And so when Disney wanted to use the image of Winnie the Pooh, they ended up having to pay something like, I don't know, £40 million or some crazy amount of money to the Garrett Club for the rights to use Winnie the Pooh. That's why they're one of the richest clubs in the whole of the West End. We're in Bedford Street now, by the way, named after the Earl of Bedford. That's where Van Gogh used to work. He had a job in there. But then he had a very bad temper. He was very irascible. So they packed him off back to Paris. It's not very much to look at now, is it? I mean, I suppose it must have looked a bit different. But right opposite number 25 is the main entrance to St. Paul's Church.
It's getting harder all the time. So when will you be mine? If you don't answer, I think
it's called the Actors' Church because it has an association with actors, and inside they've got loads of memorials to people like Charlie Chaplin, Noel Coward, Thomas Arne, who wrote Rule Britannia, when Britain first at heaven's command, a rose out of the earth. But the most important one, of course, Simon, is John Thaw. The Sweeney. Come on. I love how it always used to end really suddenly.
Negative note.
Yeah. Anyway, the church was consecrated in 1638. So strictly speaking, the entrance of the church is on the wrong side because they wanted to have the entrance on the piazza. That would have made sense, but they insist on having the altar on its traditional position, which is at the eastern end of the church, I think. And that's why the door around the other side is actually sealed up. Otherwise, you'll be walking straight through into the altar. Pretty much the oldest building in Covent Garden. It's still standing. But yeah, this would have been a graveyard. There's still dead bodies underneath the ground here. These are watchmen's huts, you know, the night watchmen. Before we had police, we had these night watchmen. And guys, it's got a window either side of it. This is probably a replica actually, but don't know if it's original. But it would have a window either side so that you could spot the guys coming in. You got these resurrection men who used to come and climb over the gate and dig up the dead bodies which are all buried in here and then sell them for, I don't know, medical experiments and what have you.
I've been through this all before, you can't fool me now. Can you see that?
I'm going there. Osteria Pizzeria, very nice in there. It's not just a pizzeria, by the way, it's got loads of other stuff. In fact, pizza isn't even the main thing they do. Very good place for brunch. And then Flatiron, if you like steaks, that's an excellent place to go for steak. I don't think Jane Austen went for any, but she used to live here. Look, Jane Austen. Just further along here, at number 4. Now, that used to be the Royal Air Force Recruitment Centre. Lawrence of Arabia, who was quite a big star after the First World War, he came here and tried to join up in 1922 under the name of John Ross. But the fellow who wrote the Biggles books, his name was Captain Johns, he turned him away. And so Lawrence of Arabia came back a few hours later with a messenger from the Air Ministry, and he said, "Don't you know who this is? Get him into the force at once or you'll get your bowler hat." I suppose that must mean, I wonder if that's like in Mary Poppins where he takes his bowler hat, you know, at the end, and he punches through it, and he turns his umbrella inside out. No, not that!
My name is Dr. Philistine. I've been performing in Covent Garden for like about 24 years.
Captain Franco. Franco with a K, not like the Spanish dictator, like the friendly entertainer. I do a flea circus. I got one of Britain's only flea circuses.
We got what, comedy trousers?
Hang on, I haven't got changed yet. What are you talking about? That's my street clothes, that is.
How does it work here then?
We arrive on a morning on the West Piazza and there's a lottery, and whoever comes out first every day gets the option of the first slot. It's an art form in itself. It's about the movement of people and the thinking of people and how to attract people's attention, how to sustain the attention.
We feel that it's great that there's a trust here, especially when you bring into considerations things like what's happening in the North Hall, one of the busking pitches here, which a restaurant would like to use it to put tables in and take over that space, which was originally dedicated as a street performing space. And it's also a cold weather and a rain pitch and works very well in winter. And I know the trust will be an obstacle to those short-term commercial interests.
How many? Shut up, kid. How many? 3. I do it slow motion. 3 more.
Perhaps the most interesting of these historic signs is here the set of rules that only date back to 1924 in this case.
No person shall throw any root vegetable, fruit, scone, or other missile.
And of course, many of these rules, because they were by Act of Parliament, remain unrepealed today. And I'm not convinced that it was ever formally repealed in the House of Commons.
Strictly speaking, I cannot chuck a scone at Simon. What are you going to do about it, Simon?
Can't you see that I'd be sad without you, dear? And I don't mind telling you just how I feel.
This is amazing. I've never been in here before. Can you believe it? It's superb.
Yeah, we're standing in the heart of the London Transport Museum, so this is the best place to come for London buses and tubes and a whole plethora of other items in our collection. So you start at the very top in sort of Victorian London, which tells you the story of things like the very first omnibus service in 1829, and then you come down to the floor below, which tells you the story of the early Underground, so the very first use of steam on the London Underground from 1863.
Hello, ladies.
It is amazing how they've got this entire steam locomotive up here on another floor of the museum.
I don't know how they would have done it.
Took it in the lift.
See, I remember when these ones used to come into the station. I'd be waiting on the platform for the old grey ones in the 80s, and every now and again, occasionally they'd send one of these through, and it was so nice. It's got the other part of the line there, no, that's all changed.
Yeah, a lot of the stops that don't exist anymore.
So this used to be the flower market of the original Covent Garden, so you can actually see the lovely wrought iron arches and the kind of really high ceilings and stuff, and kind of imagine this as being a scene where people were buying and selling flowers that were coming daily to the market.
My old man wore 3-piece whistles, said he smoked too many cigs. Drove a bus for London Transport. Don't take cash.
What's an Oyster card?
You have to get off then, you have to go and charge it up.
Oh, you're joking, mate.
Well, you can use your contactless.
Why don't that taxi get out of the way? It's been sitting there for the last
Get
5
out
minutes.
of the road! I'm on a tight schedule, don't you know?
We've got a Hidden London exhibition, which is really exploring disused stations on the Underground network, and to give you a sense of the history of some of those spaces.
When you are ready to leave, close the doors by pressing the close door button.
Ladies and gentlemen, we apologise for the delay to your service.
I've been through this all before, you can't fool me now. Can you see that I will see through you?
Look who it is.
Hello, Julian.
It's Janine, who does the Covent Garden magazine.
I started this magazine and it's 6 years old, and we celebrate Covent Garden. The history, the culture, the people, the community. Because I live in Covent Garden. I've been living in Covent Garden for 12 years.
Okay, show us the map at the back then. This is nice. So you can do a little walk of Covent Garden around here, a legend here telling you what each person represents.
You can buy it online at thecoventgardener.com. So, for example, we have the donkey plaque.
No, you see,
The
I've
donkey
never
plaque,
seen that.
It's so beautiful. We had 100,000 costermonger donkeys working costermonger donkey in Covent Garden.
1661 to
400.
1974. That's a remarkable amount of times. I didn't realise they were there.
I don't know what that is. That looks like a weed.
Stinging nettles.
Stinging nettles.
No, they're beautiful, these. So there's one guy in charge of all these barrows. He's done a very good job.
He's done it, and he's young. There's a resident's barrow around the corner. Any resident is allowed to take the mint and the tomatoes. I bet you didn't know that.
But only residents.
But only residents. Tomatoes, but you mustn't let Reese see you. Reese is the gardener, head gardener.
If you can't make up your mind, then
Excellent, Terry Sinclair, there he is. I mean, you came here in 1984 when you first started.
82, yeah. I rolled up, sat outside the church with my guitar, thinking, I can do that.
it shows that even a lowly busker like Terry can end up being on the Trust.
I only became a member of the Trust because I was interested in the history, and I was writing songs about Covent Garden, about not just about as it is now or fruit and veg, but about the vice and prostitutes and brothels. And
oh, now we're talking. Now we're getting into Joolz Guide territory.
The place is London to me, you know. This place used to be full of bagnios, brothels, coffee houses, poets.
Bagnios were like Turkish baths, but a lot of other stuff went on in there as well.
But this was probably the most notorious bagnio in Covent Garden. It was a hotel with 200 years or more, but you could pick up your young lady outside Tom King's coffee house on the West Piazza in front of the church and spend the night with them here at Hammond's.
It's the one that's also in a Hogarth.
That's it. It's a shack in front of the church.
That's right, yeah. And in the corner over here, there used to be the Shakespeare's Head Tavern. And that's where the sandwich was invented, because John Montague, who was, I believe, the 4th Earl of Sandwich, he was there gambling at the Beefsteak Club, which was upstairs. And someone said to him, "What do you want, sandwich?" And he said, 2 pieces of bread with some meat in between it. So when everyone else was ordering, they just said, well, just bring me what sandwich is having, a couple of rounds of sandwiches.
The head waiter was a guy called Jack Harris. Jack Harris was a pimp, and there was a book called Harris's List of Covent Garden Ladies, which was published about 40 years.
For 2 shillings, you could purchase a list of all the ladies of Covent Garden, sexual preferences, what they're prepared to do. Mary Holland, for example, tall, graceful, comely, and shy of favours, but could be modified for the cost of £20. Her sister, on the other hand, was indifferent to money, but a supper and 2 guineas would tempt her. Other publications included The Wandering Whore, available from 1660 to 1661. Miss Noble, Ploughcourt, Fetter Lane. She is a really fine girl with a lovely fair complexion. She has a most consummate skill in reviving the dead, and her tongue has a double charm. Feels like Julian Clary wrote this book, doesn't it? It's like loads of double entendres.
Jack Harris did 3 years in prison for obscenity, for running the Harris's List of Covent Garden Ladies, basically. And when he came out, he became the manager of his arch rival of a pub here called the Rose Tavern.
And another notorious place full of prostitutes lighting cigarettes from their vaginas and all stuff. Is that right?
That's true,
absolutely. They used to light vaginas.
Life was exciting then, wasn't it, really?
And Samuel Pepys came here in 1665. He said, "We drank a lot of wine, and I gave her 12 shillings. I touched her thing, but did nothing else. Although at another time and place, I believe I could do whatever I want with her." What a boaster. I know people like that.
There is some plates by Hogarth, and the third one in Rake's Progress shows a scene in the upstairs room of the Rose Tavern where there is the poor Rake on his back there, and he's drunk, and there's all these girls, and they're pinching his watch and goodness knows what, his money, and
stealing his stuff.
Oh yes, maybe what he deserved, I don't know.
It's open, the Opera House, they've got a cafe in there, and you can just go up and sit in the terrace and have a coffee and just look out over the market. A lot of people don't realise that, but it's very nice. This is the Covent Garden Opera House, and around the time that they were built, the Theatre Royal, they also built the Covent Garden Theatre, which was here. It was after Oliver Cromwell had sort of banned theatres. During the Restoration, these were the first 2 licensed theatres to open up. And many famous performers have appeared on its stage, like Margot Fonteyn, Nureyev, Pavarotti. First piano performance here was in 1767. Grimaldi, the famous clown, first made his name here. He's the one who more or less invented the traditional clown makeup. Originally, the Royal Opera House opened in 1732 as the Theatre Royal. For the first 100 years, they had exclusive rights on spoken word drama, along with the other Theatre Royal in Drury Lane.
Hi,
Daniel, excellent.
Hi.
Oh, yeah.
Nice to meet you. We make, we maintain, we safeguard, and we procure and alter anything to do with weaponry. We do it all right here.
Is this a dagger I see before me?
So these are the
Romeo and Juliet.
Romeo and Juliet. There'll be a piston, there'll be a spring, and that'll be attached to a blade. For every sword, we normally have a scabbard, a belt. For every firearm, we normally have some sort of holster. And because our runs are so long, you can get a show that exists here for 40 years. As much of that 40 years as you can have the same item that lasts and lasts well, the less materials you're having to buy to remake. So with our stage weaponry, there'll either be a very high quality replica make, or there'll be originals that have been deactivated so that they're safe to use. And it's where we do a lot of our firearms testing out here as well.
Ballistics.
We actually make up the rounds here ourselves.
Ballistics. Looks like a 45 to me.
That's a 38.
38. Okay, so 38. When someone fires a gun on the stage, the noise is coming from the gun. It's not coming from a sound effect off stage.
If we can't get the noise levels right on stage from to fire, we'll be in the side stage, but also with a firearm. Because it should be.
I tell you what.
Yeah.
I mean, and people are wielding these on. So I'm not doing this on purpose. That's the easiest way to hold it.
It's heavy, bloody heavy, isn't it? But this is why it's so important that they have it in the rehearsals. So they can get used to it and they can sing what they need to sing. What I had to do was string this on stage, put it under tension, truly under tension, load it
with this,
truly load it, point it in the general direction of a small child with an apple above their head, fire it. Bolt had to disappear, and it had to be physically impossible, mechanistically impossible, for that bolt to go anywhere near that child. Into the sleeve, settled and ready to
Present
go.
Arms.
And then I'm going to fire this now.
Okay. Oh, and it's just completely disappeared. Shotguns. What, like guns that fire shot?
That's actually got a flint mechanism rather than a percussion mechanism, so that would be pre-1840s.
The production values at the Royal Opera House are definitely higher than Joolz guides. We would have just headed down to the local fancy dress shop and picked up one of those for about £5. This would be my party piece, that. Gone out and goes. Happens when you don't practice. First piano performance in 1767. Handel did his first operas here. And of course, it's the home of the Royal Ballet. The Queen's even got her own special box, and I think he's got his own special toilet there as well, that she could use. Do not sit on or move this chair. I guess that's the chair where one sits to be seen. I wonder how much it costs to rent the box next to it.
So is Pagliacci. Recita mentre prese dal delirio.
Like a bit of Pagliacci. Look, the Royal Lavatory, presumably installed for Queen Victoria. I guess your ordinary punters probably wouldn't have had these sorts of luxuries, so going to the theatre must have been quite a tricky experience for them. We've got such a lovely cafe up here. It's a really nice terrace up here. You can just buy a coffee and come up here and get this amazing view.
And you got Nelson's column over there. You can see Nelson's column from here.
I mean, that's beautiful. That looks like
it was built as the floral hall to sell exotic flowers from around the world, and it was in direct competition with Covent Garden Market. But it was like a white elephant. They never sold anything. So basically, they used to try and put concerts on in there. That flopped. So for hundreds of years, it was just used as storage, and it fell into disrepair. They had a fire. Part of that's been removed now and taken up to Borough Market. And
so Borough Market is made out of a part
of this stuff, and it's basically the same sort of materials that the Great Exhibition of 1851.
Well, that's what the Crystal Palace would have looked like.
You find around all over the country.
When you're having your cucumber sandwiches and salmon during the interval, you can go in there.
It's lovely. They've done a great job of that.
For all my friends have settled down.
This is Bow Street Magistrates Court. Well, it used to be Bow Street's Magistrates Court. They've turned it into a hotel and a bar now. This is sort of where the police force first started up. So I was saying about how we didn't have any police in those days. You just have to shout, "Stop thief," and people would run after you. But one of the magistrates here was Henry Fielding, famous author. And he came up with the idea of the Bow Street Runners. Well, they started out as 6 blokes catching criminals and making, well, citizens' arrests, I suppose. And that continued until around 1829, when Robert Peel came up with the idea for actual metropolitan police force. And that's why we call the police bobbies, because they're named after Sir Robert, and Bobby is short for Robert. Anyway, Henry Fielding was succeeded by his brother, who was blind, John Blindbeak Fielding, who could identify 3,000 criminals just by the sounds of their voices. He was the one who tried Casanova when Giacomo Casanova was tried here, and he let him off as well. It's amazing, you can actually go inside now, and they've got the very courtroom where people like Oscar Wilde stood in the dock.
That's where he would have stood, somewhere over there. Crippen, the Craze.
Bedrooms.
Yeah, that's extraordinary.
You've got a really nice restaurant here too, but they only let me film it on my phone, so you can't quite see it in all its glory.
Before we take our leave, open up the wet one.
This is a Theatre Royal, Drury Lane. This is actually built in 1663, not this version of it. It was a bit smaller before. It's the oldest theatre in London, well, that's still operating, I suppose. And this is the one where John Dryden used to write plays featuring Nell Gwyn. And Nell Gwyn was, of course, the famous mistress of King Charles II. And they say that there used to be a tunnel that went underneath the road from the theatre to the tavern opposite, where he could go and have these illicit meetings with her after the shows. First place that they sang God Save the King in there, actually, 1745. Now, back in 1704, John Dennis, who was this pretty hopeless playwright, he had come out with this play called Appius and Virginia, in which there's some thunder, and he had developed this new mechanism of making that sound by rattling balls around in a bowl. Anyway, they didn't like the play much, so they took it off, and they replaced it with Macbeth, I think, in which there's also this sound of thunder, and they used the same technique in this play. And he said, well, damn their eyes, they won't show my play, but they steal my thunder. And so ever since then, we've had this handy phrase.
Dear me. Oh, my goodness. Hey! Doesn't it hurt your balls? It's got to hurt your balls.
Just have a different shaped bottom for a month.
They're using Boris spikes, though.
You'd have to say, on the whole, that's not very comfortable.
That's all right.
Again, we're just coming down Tavistock Street here. Right at the top there, that's the oldest street sign in London, they say. Look, 1636.
Oh, the little white plaque.
Yeah, it says York Street, even though they've changed the name to Tavistock Street. So you definitely get points if you spot those. So this is Drury Lane, and up at the end there is where two French sailors collapsed in 1665, and so everyone blamed the French for having started the plague. They said, oh, the plague was started by the French, those French sailors who died over there. But actually it turned out that it was some weavers who had opened up a parcel which arrived from Holland, and they say that maybe that's how the plague got here. But it was down in this street that Samuel Pepys described walking down here and just saying that there were loads of doors which said, Lord have mercy upon us on them. This is a lovely restaurant, Sarastro. It's all beautiful, it's like theatrical boxes and Aladdin's cave, it's beautiful. And the toilets in there do have some rather fruity pictures.
Good gracious. Goodness me.
We had dinner at the end there with my mum once.
It's gorgeous.
Where my friend asked her out. She'll never stop talking about it. I think she just liked the toilets. So atmospheric.
Oh yeah! Oh yeah! Today, the Covent Garden Area Trust is 31 years old.
The Covent Garden Area Trust's head lease means that the owners own the freehold of the place and then sublet it back from the trust who holds the head lease.
The trustees are presenting the rent to the leaseholders, rosy apples and posies of flowers.
That means that we have to pay a ground rent, and every year we have a ceremony where we parade around the building, and at the three principal stops we pay to the freeholders a ground rent, and the ground rent is a posy and rosy red apples. So we present them with a toffee apple and a posy of flowers.
Can't you see that I'd be sad without you, dear? And I don't mind mind telling you just how.
Lamb and Flag. This is the oldest pub in Covent Garden. John Dryden, who actually lived just over there on Longacre, just opposite here, he was the famous playwright. He got beaten up in this alleyway by thugs hired by the Earl of Rochester, John Wilmot, court poets to King Charles II. But he wrote such kind of lascivious, dirty, filthy poems. But the king loved him. He's the guy who's played by Johnny Depp in that film The Libertine. I like it because it was my first ever Joolz guide that I ever did was in here. It was there because they used to do the jazz in there.
For like 10 years. Very relaxed, isn't it? Such a really good mood. It's fun, it's nice, it's also honest, and then there are also newcomers every time, so it's also a good way to meet new people.
By the early 19th century, this place had developed a bit of a reputation for bare-knuckle fist fighting, and it became known as the Bucket of Blood.
This is absolutely beautiful, you know. In the backstreet pub in central London, find something like this, it's unique.
How old are you? 8. And are you married? She's not married, and she recommends... Do you recommend the Lamb and Flag? Honestly, back at one of my favourite pubs. Thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you enjoy the videos, and don't forget to follow me on my Instagram, which is @JoolzGuidesOfficial. And if you like the music, you can check out Terry St Clair's CDs, which follow the links below. And above all, don't forget to appreciate the work that the Covent Garden Trust do to keep the whole place looking characterful and historic. Cheers, Simon. I'll drink to that. See you soon.